Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is just a shade before 11:30 on a Monday, a soggy Monday, as we're here to talk kind of the same old song and dance we've done these last few weeks, and that is apprising the masses of where we are at with the high school baseball and softball playoffs. We are down to the fifth round over in softball. The regional finals are coming up later on this week, and then baseball is one round behind. They're in the regional semifinals later on this week. So in total, we have 7 high schools from our coverage area that are still swinging. Over in softball, we have Prosper, Flower Mound, and Lovejoy. Sorry. And then in baseball, Marcus, Coppell, Lovejoy, and Wakeland. So we'll get to everybody in some form or fashion over these next 30, 40 minutes or so. We're going to start over in baseball, though, and kind of whether it's looking ahead to what's coming up this week or just recapping some of the fun times from the regional quarterfinal round the week before. Let's talk a little stick and ball. Let's start over in Region 1. David, Coppell lives on to fight again, man. This is quite the murderer's road that Coppell is taking down as they have now slayed 2 consecutive state-ranked opponents. They have a third coming up this week. It was a very, very anticipated series between Coppell and Prosper. Prosper, state-ranked, looking all sorts of good stuff heading into the third round. Neither of these teams won their district, but still making runs to the third round. It looked like a very close series on paper, and it materialized as such, but in the end, it was Coppell just continuing to grind these games out. I believe it was a pair of one-run victories.
3-2 and 1-0.
Yes, so very, very pitching-oriented, very defense-oriented runs were very much at a premium in this series, but Coppell lives to fight another day. David, how did they do it?
Well, they held Prosper to without a run for the final 13 innings of the series.
That helps.
Yeah, so if you're a Prosper fan, you had to love the start of this series right here. Coppell, was going into this the regional quarterfinals for the first time since 2016, but Prosper, who's no stranger to success as well either, they took a 2-0 lead in the first inning on a 2-run home run by Easton Carmichael, and that home run broke up a string of 4 straight complete game shutouts by Will Rodman, the Coppell's ace right there.
Man.
But Rodman, I think that maybe ticked him off a little bit. So all he did is didn't allow another run for the next 6 innings right there. And then he got some backing just in the next half inning. Coppell scores 3 runs in the top of the second, and Rodman does what he does best, is just hold the opposing offense down. Coppell wins the first game 3-2. The next game, another great pitchers duel as well. Obviously, Josh Barnhouse, he's been one of their top pitchers in the area this year for Prosper, and he throws another amazing game for Prosper. He allows just 1 run on 5 hits with 4 strikeouts, but it was just that 1 run that made the difference right there. It was a 0-0 game going into the 7th inning right there, and Coppell gets a walk-off. Tanner Sever, hits a liner to center field right there. Tony Venars comes around third base to score 1-0 Coppell, and they get not only the run, but they get that pitching in that game as well too. Tim Malone, another outstanding effort for him. 6 innings, 2 hits, 4 Ks, and then Will Boylan comes in the 7th inning right there, strikes out 2, doesn't allow another run. So Coppell, they go on. It was their third, shutout of this postseason in 6 games right there. They've allowed only 10 runs in 6 games right there. So they're moving on to the regional semifinals for the first time since 2016. And it's going to be a great one. Like you mentioned, they're going to play Keller in the next round. And Murderer's Row continues right here.
Just another state-ranked opponent.
Another state-ranked opponent. No problem at all. So and it's actually a game. Actually, Coppell's actually played Keller this year, way back on March 12th. And Coppell actually beat Keller 11-4, and the Cowboys actually scored 11 runs, not 11, but 8 runs on the top of the first inning.
Okay, wow. So we'll see. But, with Coppell, I believe it's – all right, so this is the deepest they've been since 2016. I think if you go back even further, this is the second time, I guess, then, since 2007 that they've been 4 rounds deep, which it's notable because with Coppell, and this predates your time here, but it feels like Coppell has always had the ammunition to make runs like this every year, it seems. I mean, they're always among the most talented teams in the area. And, they'll score a number of signature wins during the preseason. They'll always play well in district. But then for one reason or another, another, it feels like Coppell's season would end, and you'd always feel like, it's kind of a round or two earlier than I would have expected. They would always leave a little bit of meat on the bone, so it's nice to see whether it's something special about this group, whether it's the Ryan Howard factor. Before he got to Coppell, he had an amazing run at Lake Dallas and leading them to the regional tournament, and you give him a talent base like what Coppell traditionally has and see the kind of magic that he could potentially cook. Either way, it's been a really nice resurgence for Coppell baseball as they're now headed to the regional semifinals. Also, on the other half of that bracket, you have Marcus, who is still playing. Marcus, who was able to get past Plano, swept that series in the regional quarterfinals by scores of 4-0, which included a no-hitter thrown by Tate Evans. And then the game I was at last Friday, a 7-4 victory. It was my first time getting to see Marcus. Long overdue, getting to see the Marauders in person. Just impressed with just the balance of their lineup. All 9 starters in that lineup had either a hit or an RBI. They had 6 RBIs between 6 different players. Tyler Schott led off the game with a triple, had 2 hits, really got the juices flowing there when you lead off a potential advancement game with a triple like that. Ty Johnson had 2 hits as well. There just isn't really a resting spot in that lineup, and that's kind of been their MO all season with that sort of balance. And any one night it could be a certain guy that steps up and delivers. And then the pitching has been just airtight, lights out all season. Like I mentioned, Tate Evans having a no-hitter. Tyler Schott had been in really, really good form. Plano was able to touch him up a little bit relative to how most teams have been able to handle Tyler Schott this season. They did get 10 hits off Schott, which through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, he had only given up 7 hits total. And then, Plano, we talked about him last week, just this, it'll take a full 7 innings to put him down, as resilient as that team is. And, even though Marcus was able to get some distance in this one, leading 7-2 heading into the bottom of the 7th, Plano still gave itself a chance there in the end. They were able to they loaded up the bases right out of the chute in the bottom of the 7th. They were able to score a couple runs off of that, and then bases are loaded with 1 out. The winning run is at the plate on 2 separate occasions. They turn to reliever Mickey Sheets, and he is able to get the job done, retire the last 2 batters, and preserve and just prevent any more heroics by Plano. But Plano almost put a little bit of a scare into him. So, nevertheless, though, Marcus advances, and just like Coppell has a really credentialed opponent coming up next in Keller, Marcus plays no stranger to this juncture of the postseason, and that is Southlake Carroll. Southlake, they're not ranked this season, but don't let that throw you off the scent. It's still Southlake Carroll. They're always playing this deep in the playoffs. They're always good. If you remember, obviously we did not get a postseason last year, but in 2019, Southlake Carroll won state. And that was the second of back-to-back state championships, actually the 3rd consecutive year during a stretch in which they advanced to the state tournament. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but that Southlake team back in 2019, the interesting fact about them, they did not return a single starter from their 2018 title team, and they still won state. So this is a program that, this is just old hat for them. They thrive at this juncture of the season. They are able to elevate their game. And now they have been pushed the distance these last 2 rounds, in the second round against EP Montwood, and then in the regional quarters against Odessa Permian. They did go to Game 3 in both those series, but it appears Southlake is built for that fight as they proceeded to take it to EP Montwood 10-0 in Game 3 of that series, and then they thrashed Permian 11-1 in Game 3. So whether that speaks to just the depth within that rotation or whatnot, but that is a team that if this series does end up going 3 games, obviously some very, very they're very comfortable in those circumstances. But that should be a really good one. Marcus, their last time that they were in this, they were just in the 4th round back in 2019 and lost to that same Southlake team that went on to win state. So no shortage of history between these 2 programs. Let's see. Then you look over in Region 2, and we had to say goodbye to the last fighting soldier from Garland ISD as Sachse went out of the hands of, what was it, Heath? The Heath Hawks did it to him? Rockwell?
Yeah. Both Rockwell and Rockwell Heath are moving on to the...
surprise. Yeah.
So, two very good programs. So this was a very good series.
Yeah.
Sachse, Rockwell Heath has been state ranked for much of the year. Sachse, as we alluded to in past podcasts, was under 500 for a big bulk of the season. Caught fire at the end, and then obviously, advanced to the regional quarterfinals for the first time in program history. And they continued that trend. They jumped on Heath on the first game. Carson Sowell and Jason Scranton combined in a no-hitter on Thursday night, and they take the opener. And you think, I kind of like their chances with who they had, rolling out. But then look back at it from covering Heath from afar during the district season, their pitching depth is very good. And Baylor Bowman comes out on Friday and pitches. He has a no-hitter through 5. They win that game 5-0. In a game that was close to the later innings. And then they returned on Saturday morning. And Jason Scranton, who'd won Game 3 against Belton the week before for Sachse, did a good job limiting the damage. It was a close game early on. And then in the 4th inning there, Carson Krauke for Rockwall Heath hits a grand slam. And, in a Game 3, anytime a grand slam was going to be big anytime, but in a Game 3, and it just completely shifted it, the momentum, and it was kind of that was the blow. But, tremendous season for Sachse. They're a relatively young team. They lose a handful of guys, but they're going to be back. And I think this is what they've been kind of building toward. Again, they've been a perennial playoff team, but never made it to the 3rd round. That 2nd round, we'll see how it varies from year to year. But a lot of times in the 2nd round in Region 2, you run into that Killeen, Temple, Belton district, and you don't really have any knowledge of them. It's similar to run into West Texas teams, that we were talking about. So it's really kind of hard to gauge, but they're always generally solid programs coming out of that Central Texas region. So if they get to the 3rd round, it was a big accomplishment. But again, those Rockwall teams are tough. There's a reason they're both in the regional semifinals. So
one step closer to getting Rockwall versus Heath in the regional finals. We'll see if that's what materializes out in Region 2.
Yeah, and they had the play-in game for the number 1 seed that went 14-13. Yes, 14-13, I believe, was the final on that. So
maybe the best baseball game all regular season in the area. Goodness. So let's see. Speaking of Region 2, we can stay in Region 2, albeit at the 5A classification, because we had a couple of fascinating regional quarterfinal series, including one that actually did go the distance. 3 games were required to decide a winner between the Colony and Frisco Wakeland. Ultimately, it was the Wolverines over at Wakeland that advanced. It seems like a fairly competitive series otherwise. So just what was, either of y'all, just what was kind of the read from one side to the other on how what was the difference in this series?
I'd say just the pitching depth of Wakeland.
Really?
Yeah. Obviously, the Colony, they take Game 1 behind Ryan Scott, who struck out 13 batters, and they won that game 2-0. They get a sacrifice RBI by Kate Irwin in the 3rd inning, and in the next inning they get a solo home run by Nola Oliveira to, pretty much put the difference in that game. But after that, Wakeland's just pitching depth is unbelievable. They held the Colony to just 1 run over the last 2 games.
Really?
Yeah, and the Colony actually took a lead in this. That 1 run gave them a 1-0 lead there in the 3rd game right there. But like I said, Wakeland's pitching depth was just amazing in this series. In the Game 2 right there, it was a great pitching battle between Robert Fortenberry, who's going to TCU, and Devin Reyna for the Colony. And Fortenberry got a little bit better of Reyna in that series, even though, like I said, both pitchers threw a great game. Fortenberry, 9 strikeouts, allowed just 3 hits right there. And Reyna, he pitched just as great. He had 9 strikeouts by himself as well, too, pitched a complete game. And the only run that came in the game was a RBI double by Preston Sneed in the 4th inning right there. So that forced Game 3 right there. And like I said, the Colony took a 1-0 lead on Ryan Scott's RBI sacrifice fly in the 1st inning. But Wakeland, they took advantage of some mistakes that the Colony made. Mm-hmm. The Colony, the Colony pitching staff, they allowed just 2 hits in this game, but they still lost.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the difference in this game is that the pitching staff gave up 7 walks, and their defense, committed 4 errors. Mm-hmm. So, there you go. And obviously, another pitching gem that they have is Blake Seditol, who I believe is going to Auburn. Complete game, allows just 1 run, 4 strikeouts. So Wakeland goes on, and like you said, they're going to be playing at Duncanville this week against Corsicana. Just continues the tradition that they have for Wakeland, and tough ending, for the Colony. Furthest they ever advanced in the postseason. They went to the regional quarterfinals for the first time in program history, won their first district title in school history, and 25 wins that they had this season was the most in program history. So obviously not the ending that they wanted, but just an amazing run that this program went on this season.
Then on the other half of that Region 2 5A bracket, you've got Lovejoy, who is still swinging. Lovejoy, which is in the regional semifinals for just the second time in program history, and we had a little bit of a 10-5A on 10-5A warfare in the third round as Lovejoy swept Prosper Rock Hill. Rock Hill, the first-year program, in the third round. Lovejoy got the better of them by scores of 6-0 and 5-4. Game one, big story was just the tag team of Brant Corley and Dylan Collins teaming up for that shutout. And then in game two, Lovejoy actually grabs the lead in the bottom of the fifth inning with 3 runs, an RBI single by Ralph Rucker, and then a 2-run double by Matthew Maynard. So the backfield for Lovejoy's football team coming through on the baseball diamond now. Despite that, this was a series where Rock Hill certainly made them work, especially there in that game, too. Lovejoy needed to throw 143 pitches to get through this one. And despite giving up just 5 hits in that game, they used 4 different pitchers. It was eventually, though, Brett Landman, reliever, who was credited with the win. Dylan Collins coming in and getting the save. And now up next for Lovejoy, they draw Hallsville, who is ranked number 11 in the state. By TX High School Baseball. They're also number 4 in the state by the Texas High School Baseball Coaches Association. They're good. That's the long and short of it. Allowing just 1 run per game in the playoffs. They've got 2 shutouts from their game 1 pitcher this postseason, Jeb Drury. So we will see what is in store when these 2 lock horns. I believe game 1 is going to be all the way out in White House, and then game 2 in Rockwall. So Lovejoy bound for the regional semifinals, and it's actually a pretty festive time just for Lovejoy in general, because the softball team is also still playing. As we now shift gears and talk a little bit of softball, Lovejoy's softball team is in the regional finals, and guess what? They are also playing Hallsville. So some nice little Lovejoy versus Hallsville games scheduled for this week. So Lovejoy softball was able to punch its ticket to the 5th round by sweeping Sulphur Springs, scores of 7-0 and 3-2. They actually walked off an opponent for the second straight series. Jade Owens, just a sophomore, she was the hero in game 2. She had an RBI single in the bottom of the 8th to score Hannah Harvey, so extra innings required for this one. Owens had her fingerprints all over this series. She pitched all 15 innings. She struck out 15 total batters across the 2 games. Again, just a sophomore, alongside players like Hannah Harvey, who had a home run in game 1. Sydney Bardwell and Bailey Bradshaw were swinging the bat pretty well as well. And they've now, this is a team that needed to go 3 games just to get out of the first round. Wakeland was able to push them a little bit and sent them to a 3rd game, but they've now won 7 consecutive games since then. And now they get a chance to go up against a Hallsville team that's in a good way. Hallsville swept Rock Hill softball team in its 4th round matchup, I should say. Scores of 5-0, 10-4, and Rock Hill's in just a really tough time generating steady offense against the Hallsville pitcher, Maddie Melton, who only allowed 4 runs all series, but none of them were earned. Just 7 hits in total. Hallsville, by contrast, had 5 extra base hits. So 2 very, very different methods to approach right there. And now Lovejoy, they're in the regional finals for the 4th time, the first since 2015. And I was actually at this game now that I think of it, because I was thinking, that sounds familiar. Back in 2015, I believe it was out at Highland Park. The year that they got eliminated that year was by nobody other than Hallsville. So nice little chance to come full circle. Of course, this current roster, I believe they were all probably in 5th or 6th grade back then. So not sure that's any extra motivation or anything. Not sure they've looking to avenge that team's the 2015 team's loss and whatnot. But yes, Lovejoy and Hallsville, both baseball and softball, later on this week. And then we can close out now with a look at a pretty fun little regional final over in for Region 1 over in 6A. And that is one that I think folks have kind of had their eye on this as a potential regional finals matchup for some time. And that is the long-awaited clash between Flower Mound and Prosper. Both these teams have been head and shoulders the best up to this point. It's no surprise to see both these teams get this far. They both look like gangbusters in their regional semifinal wins. Flower Mound was lured into the 1 game, the first time all postseason they've had a 1-game series against South Lake Carroll, a spirited little plucky underdog, that's South Lake Carroll. Flower Mound, though, just took it to them. A Landry Harris no-hitter, 12-0 run rule win. They handily walked to the 5th round. And then Prosper, against what head coach Todd Radenwater said was one of the better hitting teams that they've come up against this season in Saginaw Boswell, and they allow one run, 6-1 and 3-0 the scores as they were able to sweep that series in 2 games. Prosper unbeaten in the playoffs; they've won 14 in a row. Flower Mound has shown some attrition to get to this point. They've had to win a couple game 3s, ironically enough, against the other 2 teams from District 5, 6A that they've gone up against. The first round against McKinney-Boyd, and then in the regional quarterfinals against Allen. These 2 teams did see each other back in tournament play, in a tournament in Allen. Prosper won the game 9-3. And I believe that was actually Flower Mound's only loss in the regular season. But again, it's a preseason game. You don't read too much into them. Both teams look completely different now. Landry Harris didn't pitch that game. The lineups are night and day from what they were back in February when they first played. I'm just interested in the series because it's a contrast in styles. When you look at Prosper with that power game of Sydney Lewis and Elizabeth Moffitt, Gabby Coffey, and just versus a Flower Mound team that just they take it to you with just this death by 1,000 cuts approach of just the bunting and the base running. And McKenna Andrews with Flower Mound, she's been rolling at the plate. She went in that game against South Lake. She went 3 for 3. It was a home run shy of the cycle. She had 5 RBIs in that win. And also, and I don't know if this is any coincidence or not, but these are the 2 teams that have made their way through the postseason by using 2 pitchers instead of relying on the one arm to just carry you for an entire series. With Flower Mound, with Landry Harris and Abigail Jennings, we talked about, throughout the postseason that they will just the way that they will mix and match those 2, and just it won't be a case where just one starts the entirety of one game and one gets the entirety of the next game. They'll go inning to inning with these 2 pitchers if they have to, and it's been a very successful strategy. I believe they are undefeated as far as games in which which they're alternating between those 2 pitchers, and it's done a really good job keeping some really talented offenses off balance. Whereas Prosper is a little bit more traditional with their approach with Abby Beasley and Alyssa Griffin. They'll start, like in the case of their series against Boswell, they looked to Beasley to throw game 1, and then Griffin got game 2, and it's been, there's just really no drop-off from one to the other. So they're 2 teams that have been able to as far as not letting any of their arms get tired. And that's one of those things with, talking with the Flower Mound coach, Mark Lariba, their co-head coach, after their games against Boyd and after the games against Allen, they relish getting a 3-game series. They want to take you that deep so they can try to test your depth against theirs, banking on the fact that, a lot of these teams rely on that one arm, like that Kinsey Cackley or Alexis Telford, and that eventually by the time you get to game 3, there'll already be enough wear and tear on you that they'll be able to then pull ahead, and, that'll be the difference. And Prosper's one of those teams just because of, again, the fact that they use 2 pitchers with a lot of success as well that might not be able to, that might not crater to that depth. It should make for an interesting intangible as these 2 teams lock horns. Prosper has been to state only one other time, 2003. Flower Mound, meanwhile, this is their deepest playoff run ever. Surprising. I was kind of surprised to see that. But, this is the first time that they have been in the regional finals. And means we'll have one team from our coverage area, at least, competing at state the following week down in Austin. So this series, just a scheduling note, because it's a little bit different in that respect. So do not marry yourself to any one location for this, because if the series does go 3 games, it will take place at 3 different venues. As you've got game 1 set for Wednesday, 7:30 at Marcus, so close to Flower Mound. Game 2 is Thursday, 7:30 at Rock Hill, close to Prosper. And then if necessary, game 3 will be Friday, 7:30 over at Denton Geyer, which that'd be awesome. I don't know if you guys have been to Denton Geyer's softball facility.
I've seen it, but I've never been inside of it.
It's quite nice. It is very nice. It is the best I've seen this season. So yes, Prosper versus Flower Mound, the People's Regional Final, as I'm calling it, as we will see one of those 2 gets out of Region 1 and heads to state. And let's see, and that'll do it, folks. That is a look at all the teams that we still have kicking around in the postseason, baseball and softball, and we'll see what happens later on this week. Be back again next week to talk about it all once again, break it all down, and see where we are at in the postseason. Until then, folks, you take care, and we will talk to y'all later.